Each of our colleagues this morning are going to talk for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll launch into questions or watch them talk among each other for a few minutes. But we'll just let it go as we did last night, very much a discussion of all of us in the room, and we'll go for probably a little over an hour. Go ahead. And remember, okay, you've got the mics that don't need to be turned on now. That's great.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Is it on? All right, good. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pekka Pekkala, and good morning, everybody. I think that camera is on, so I think we are going live as well. And I'm actually a tech writer. I'm a journalist. I've worked in a big newspaper in Finland for 13 years. Then I came to USC Annenberg to do a specialized journalism master's program 4 years ago. And after that, I decided I actually like to do some research. And I stayed there and participated in a project called Sustainable Business Models for Journalism. And that was a project between USC Annenberg, a university in Finland called University of Tampere, and Waseda University in Tokyo in Japan. And we looked into sustainable business models in journalism, which means we tried to find journalism startups, blogs, anything to do with journalism that are actually making money and paying enough money for the founders or the founder to support their lives. And the whole idea started from the point when I moved to LA 4 years ago and moved to a neighborhood called Echo Park. And I realized that there is no news about Echo Park. There's tens of thousands of people living in my new neighborhood, and I have absolutely no idea what's going on in my neighborhood, except if there is a shooting. Then the local media comes over and covers that. I started browsing the internet, found out that there's actually local blogs in my neighborhood, and Twitter feeds and neighborhood council bulletin boards that are providing that information. And I made it into an RSS feed, and that became my newspaper for that year. And I decided that this is actually pretty good. I mean, all these independent local bloggers are creating information that is really valuable for me as a person just moved into LA. And I decided to do my thesis on that. And while I was doing my thesis, I realized that these people, some of them are former journalists, professional journalists from LA Times, and they really know how to do good journalism, but they have no idea how to make money. So then I proposed a research project for Annenberg and the university back home, that we should actually go and look around if we can find somebody who has found the magic box, how to make money. And that's what we did. The project ran for 2 years, and the findings were kind of surprising. So unfortunately, we didn't find any magic box how to make money in journalism startups. What we found out was that basically advertising was the major revenue stream still all around the world. And it was kind of surprising, at least for me. I've been a tech writer. I've been following tech startups, and my job is to find new things and tell how these new companies are making money out of new things. And then I do similar work among journalism startups, and I found out that they are still selling advertising, and that's the basic revenue stream. Of course, if you go to our website, which is submerger.net, I'm going to type it down soon. And of course, there is different revenue streams there. There is event marketing, there is consulting, syndication, printing books, all that. But still, the major revenue stream is from advertising. And the other major finding we found out in our research was that what journalists lack, and this probably doesn't come to, isn't a surprise for any of you, is that they lack business skills. So the basic formula is that you start your news blog, and or when you plan to start your news blog or your niche blog, you think that there is somehow the money just will appear. Somebody will give me money somehow. And journalists don't realize when they are starting their blogs that you actually have to start doing the business part as well. And what I found out, I did all the interviews in the US cases, 10 cases in total, is that most journalists, former journalists, now publishers basically, told me that the biggest step was for them to realize that I'm running a business. If I want my business to succeed, I have to like the business part as well, because it's taking at least half of my time. If I do 10-hour days, 5 hours of day goes to the business part, 5 hours goes to the journalism. So if I don't like the business part, this is going to be miserable for me. And the other finding was that they were the people who actually understood best what the value of their publication was. So it requires hard work and business skills, but most of the people I talked to said that journalists have the basic business skills. We all are used to make cold calls and finding out about new things, and that's basically how you sell advertisements. You make cold calls and visit businesses and tell what you are doing and hope that they advertise later. Then on the advertisements, how do they sell advertisements? Some of the cases, like Ars Technica, had outsourced the sales pretty soon, early on in their publication. But for example, the hyperlocal ones, they all sold the advertisements by themselves, and they didn't sell CPMs like Ars Technica, all the big businesses. But they sold advertisements on weekly or monthly rates. And an interesting thing that I found out when I was doing the interviews was that the way they talked about selling advertisements differed a lot from the traditional business talk you hear when you talk to the professional ad salespeople. Because the way the local advertisement market works is that you get the monthly or weekly rates, and the business owners in your local market have to realize that you are part of the business community. And once they realize that you are actually doing good for the community by publishing news, they are willing to buy the advertisements. And once they buy the advertisement, they don't ask, how many clicks do I get, or what is your CPM rate, or how many page views you have, how many unique visitors, how many minutes per page they spend, what is the ratio between new and returning visitors. None of that. They just want to buy advertising because they think you're part of the community. And I haven't done any research on beyond that, but it's just my thought that probably that's why AOL and Patch.com has failed, because everybody knows that, and this came through the interviews, that people know that Patch is not really local. It's not a local business. It's run by AOL, and if I give money to Patch website, it goes somewhere to New York, and that's why in the same city a true local news startup can success, but the Patch.com struggles. And I'm sure Ron will tell more about the other problems that probably Patch has had. But so it's in a nutshell, our research was kind of disappointment, at least for me, because we didn't find anything super fancy new things that I could go and present to every new media company in the world, saying, okay, this is how you make money. This is how easy it is. What we found out, it requires hard work, mostly advertising, and mostly cutting costs. So you have to remember these small startups employ 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And when you don't have staff of 10 or 20 or 50, and you don't have an office, and you don't have expense accounts, you can run the business very cheaply. So if you think about a traditional newspaper model, where you spend probably 20–30% of the revenue on the newsroom, these local blogs use 80–90% of the revenue on the newsroom, which means the salary of everyone. So it's a clear path to success, that you have to be very, very frugal when you run these operations. And I think that's the biggest challenge for the old media. I mean, they know how to sell advertisements. They probably work hard as well, but the cutting cost part is very, very difficult for a traditional media company. How do you run a newspaper from somebody's home? So Thanks.
My name is Reade Brower. I'm a publisher and an entrepreneur with a core competency on the ad sales side. And we publish a group of traditional newspapers with a digital platform and strategy that's based on revenues. We have about 11 to 12,000 paid newspaper circ and about 5,000 plus online subscribers. And I think there are three keys to viability. Key number one is sustainability. We must create a sustainable revenue model to keep from going dark again. Under the previous Village Soup model, my wife went online morning, noon, and night to get her news, her local news, giving her absolutely zero reasons to go to the newsstand on Thursdays and buy the paper. So without a paywall, there's simply not enough revenue online to pay for 10 plus reporters. My key number two was to change and adapt, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We went back to the original mastheads in all of our papers, and readers were established because it created a connection with the past and with the history. We decided to charge 8 cents a day for the content. It made sense to them. They understood that you can't give away your core product and survive. That's why the lights went out. Key number three is I looked at the musts. The first must was you have to pay for the content. You can't send those 10 plus reporters on the streets without charging readers for the content they provide. And 8 cents a day for us was the difference maker. Innovation, you need to create alternative advertising revenue sources. Banner advertising alone just doesn't cut it. Never has, and it never will. So at Village Soup, one of the things that Rich did is he put these biz brief, which offered their advertisers a hyper-local strategy where they could post their own online specials, they could post their own press releases, their own classifieds, plus they would get a rotating banner for just $25 a week. And with over 300 plus biz members, the math produces over $30,000 a month in revenue, which is about 25% of our total revenue, which is derived online. But it's certainly an important part to a small publisher like myself. Our emphasis is still heavily weighted on the print because I still believe that you need to adapt. You don't need to throw the whole concept out the window. I also believe in investing and not divesting. I think that the strategies have been cut. I mean, at Village Soup, the jobs had been cut. Everybody had been asked to take a 10% pay cut. And it gets to a point where, you don't have enough people on the streets, you have terrible morale. There comes a time to invest. And I think the story, the Orange County Daily Register story, where they increased their commitment, they increased their content, it led to more circulation. More circulation leads to more advertising, and it just makes sense. I believe one of the musts is to figure out a way for print and online to work together. There's been numerous studies, and I have a few of them if people want to look at them later, that have shown this to be so, that when people use both, they get better results. When I look to the future, I'm still optimistic about print. I don't believe print is dead. I do believe it has bottomed out. My free newspaper was started 28 years ago by me and my wife. And in 2012, as a mature 28-year-old business, we had record revenues on the print side. And in 2013, we're ahead of 2012. So I think the industry is changing and morphing, but we've had that throughout our history. Radio challenged newspapers. That was the first challenge for newspapers. TV then challenged radio, and radio had to change and find a new place. And the internet has certainly changed everything, but I still believe that all three media will adapt and figure out a way to work together. And I also don't believe this is rocket science. It's just, good old common sense, to lead the way. I agree with you. There are no silver bullets. I think it's 2 4-letter words, hard and work, and we tell our reps to sell until it hurts, and then go out and sell some more. It doesn't have to be rocket science. I do believe that everything we've done to just go back to basics is what will take us forward. I guess finally, I think the judgment really comes in the color of the ink. At the end of the first 9 months of taking these papers over, and when you say the word acquiring, we really didn't acquire these. These papers went dark at 5:45 on a Friday night, and our community was devastated by the lights being turned off. And on Saturday morning, when the bank called and said, we have a responsibility to the community to keep these papers alive, and we think that you're best positioned to do it with us. It was basically a calling. And on Monday, I met them at the bank, and we had a deal because I'm part of that community, and I think that again is part of why we've succeeded. Is we're newspapers have always had been part of the fabric of the community, and I think we need to continue to be so. But I think again the real measurement for us, for any business person, is what's the color of the ink at the end of the year. And after 9 months, we were in the black. It's been 9 months more, and we're even blacker. So I think that that's really where my story starts and ends.
Reade, just before we go to Ron, I just want to ask a couple of follow-up question that would shush out a little bit more of the revenue you're talking about. You mentioned that you run sort of the equivalent of 2x2 ads online, correct, business brief ads. How many of those do you have running on a good tell cancel basis per month, roughly?
300 plus.
300 plus.
Yeah.
And typically the charge that people are paying per month on a...
They're paying $25 a week, so it's $100 a month.
Yep.
So the numbers work out to be about $400,000 a year of revenue supported from that model.
Okay, and that's online only?
That's online only.
Right.
Yeah, they get no print.
And then the other revenue benchmark I just wanted to be clear with you about is online subscription revenue. Can you just talk a little bit about what that amounts to?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, online, we decided to go, like I said, without the 8 cents a day, there was no long-term sustainability, in my opinion anyway. So we asked for 8 cents a day, which is $29 a year. And, people, gladly gave it to us. We have about 5,000 paid subscribers now, online only. And if you do those numbers out, that's $150,000 a year of revenue, which, if you look at what it costs to keep 10 plus reporters on the street, that's almost half of the budget comes from that online, because people have to pay for that content.
And what's the population size? Give people who don't know Mid-Coast Maine a sense of the size of the market that you're capturing.
It's about 40,000 households total that are served by the 3 papers of record that I have here. It's about 40,000 homes, and our paid subs are about 11 to 12,000 newspaper, 5,000 internet only, and then there's a crossover for people who, if they buy the paper online, if they buy the physical paper for $10 a year, they get the online as well.
And something that's a little bit unique about Mid-Coast Maine is it has a fairly significant tourist economy. So I'm wondering if there are more locally owned businesses, restaurants, service industries that would be able to do those small good tell cancel ads as opposed to a typical local online news community. Is that a fair metric to wonder about?
Well, I think it's a fair metric in terms of the overall picture. I don't know that it relates to the internet itself because, you know, if you look at Village Soup online and you see the 300 plus business people that are involved in these biz briefs, it really is from all over. It's the electricians, it's anybody that wants to get their message out, and they can. I think the unique piece is that they can do it themselves. They put their specials online, they put their you know, press releases online, and I think it's a smattering. The other piece that I didn't really go into is that the other profit model that I inherited and didn't know much about was this whole Village Soup platform. We have around 15 other publishers who are on the platform, and the bank was wise enough to not shut that down in the meantime. That never went dark. And so on that Monday when I took over, on Tuesday, all 15 of those people had been on a conference call together without us to talk about what was going to happen next, because to a publisher, they were all really happy with this new system that they'd all been involved with for some as long as, I don't know how long Rich had been in business, but probably a decade. And most of when I did the research to find out why are these guys happy, I think it was because I think it really was the biz memberships were creating enough revenue on the revenue side to pay for their platform use.
Thanks. Ron?
Good morning. My name is Ron Blevins. I am the Vice President of Digital Strategy for Novus Media. I've been in the advertising business for a little over 12 years. So I was with a company called OMD Digital for a while, and I handled all of Dell Computer's online advertising there. Did that for about 3 years, and then I moved over to what we usually call the client side, so that's at a corporation, an advertiser, if you will. Sears Holdings, which owns Sears and Kmart and Land's End and a number of brands that you're probably familiar with, such as Craftsman and Kenmore. And so I was the director of online and emerging media there for a couple of years, and then I moved over to AOL, and I was in a sales role there. So kind of unique in that I have experience across kind of the three main parts of the advertising ecosystem, if you will. I really hate that word, but I don't know what else to use. And then I joined Novus Media about 3 years ago, and I'll give you a little background on Novus. So Novus has been around for about almost 27 years now, and it started out as a local print strategy and buying agency. And so what that means is that our clients would come to us and with an objective in mind, we would work with publishers to buy advertising to fulfill that objective, and that was the business model. It was very successful. We were acquired by Omnicom in 2000 and have been part of the Omnicom Media Group since then. So I'll also mention that we work with, on the print side, we work with over 16,000 different local publishers on a yearly basis to buy advertising, and that's both ROP and insert. So we do a fair amount of insert business. I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So digital, we've had an offering for about 7 years. So some really smart people that were there before me decided that we should get into digital. I think that was a very nice move. And at the beginning, we were essentially a local inventory aggregator. So you could come to us and you could buy inventory across a whole host of local properties across the entire United States. So very much like our print model, except it was now digital. And I'll pause there and I'll talk to you a little bit about kind of the history of local digital buying and planning. So historically, when advertisers or agencies wanted to advertise either in a local market or in a certain geography, they would accomplish that in really one of two ways, and I see both as suboptimal. So the first way is to basically use technology and target the IP addresses of consumers' computers. So if one of my clients, let's say Nordstrom, wanted to advertise in the Minneapolis-St. Paul DMA, and they have 2 stores there, and they have to be located on the right side of the DMA, then I would have to buy the entire DMA, and I would usually do that with a large national publisher like CNN or maybe the New York Times, right? And that was really limiting because you could only really buy 3 standard ad units. So there's that way, right? And then the next way was to use a local inventory aggregator, and local inventory aggregators are, it's aptly named, right? They aggregate local inventory. So what they would do in that method or way of buying would be to work with a company to buy multiple local publishers in the Minneapolis-St. Paul DMA. Still, it was very limiting, 3 standard banner sizes, and that's what we were. And that's what we were when I joined. So you could come to us, we would buy for you, we would plan for you, and that was our value proposition. But there was a large white space in the market. If you think about advertising from any other medium, and if you look at TV, if you look at radio, if you look at print, if you look at out of home, it's all planned either locally or nationally. So from an advertising strategy standpoint, there's people who buy locally and people who buy nationally, and they take 2 separate skill sets. And with digital, it was only really the national skill set, and we would accomplish the local stuff, via technology or buying through aggregators. And I said, well, there's a tremendous amount of white space here. Why are we not taking the methods and the ways that we buy digital nationally? And when I say that, it goes much further beyond simple, banners and display ads. There's custom sponsorships. There's integration with content. There's working with publishers to develop new and unique ad units for our clients. And I said there's a huge white space in the area of local digital strategy. No one does it. And we're in a fantastic position to do that. And so that's what we've been doing for about 3 years now, since I joined the company, and it's been very successful in my eyes. My CEO would say it's not growing fast enough, but that's his job, right? The other thing that I'll talk about is really our 2 businesses. So we have our local digital strategy business, and I have a team of about 15 digital strategists that help us accomplish that. But there's also a piece of business that we run separately, and that's what I call our circular migration business. This is very important. So if you are a large national retailer, you are completely dependent upon print vehicles to deliver your weekly item and price messaging. So it's the circulars that are inside here. Right? Oh, this isn't one. Do you have any in there? Okay. So usually you get a Sunday paper, and it is chock full of advertising from Best Buy and Target and Walmart and everyone who wants to introduce you to their products. And it's one of the most effective forms of advertising that has ever been and probably ever will be. That actually serves as entertainment for people. It's consistently ranked as one of the top read portions of the Sunday newspaper. And our clients, a lot of our clients are in a bit of a conundrum because the Sunday circular to them, is like, it's like a very addictive drug. It's something that they can't get off of. It's like crack, or it's like Sirius XM satellite radio. Anybody have that? Like, when your subscription goes, after 6 months, And he's like, I got to get it back. Like, I called a day. I'm like, I need my Sirius XM radio, right? So anyway, so it's like that, and it's extremely important because not only does it drive forecastable sales and business for those retailers, but it also helps them manage their inventory. It's a great tool for the merchant. So if I'm the merchant in charge of hardware for Lowe's, and my junior merchant overbought drills, I mean, we're sitting on like 100,000 drills in our inventory that we need to get rid of, I can put that on the front cover of the circular and they'll be gone. You know, retailers also use that to set their store, you know, set the end caps. Really, it's an operational piece. And so the usage of this is simply not just for advertising, it's very operational. And that is being threatened. So as newspaper circulation declines, you know, as readership declines, as engagement with that medium declines, retailers need another option to deliver that item and price messaging. And so we have a complete you know, point of view and method of exploring ways to deliver that content digitally, both across local publishers and utilizing various advertising technologies to help retailers migrate from a 100% print to a mix of print and digital to whatever it's going to be in the future. And I think that's one of the single most important things facing advertisers today, especially retailers. And it's definitely a hard problem to solve. Many people have attempted to solve it. No one's done it well. And replacing, you know, that advertising experience is a big task. But the money involved is actually staggering. So most retailers spend over half of their Marcom budget on delivering messaging via that channel. So,
Ron, as you talk about the advertising experience,
yep.
to what extent is the ad industry or is your agency industry starting to think about ad personalization or talk a little bit about that, would you?
Yeah,
and
sure. So
whether there's a future for that for
ad
for the news
personalization, you know, we've been doing that, and you know, to a lot of people, that's like the holy grail, right? As that you can serve up a message to a consumer that is tailored to that consumer that will resonate with them based on a whole host of things. Their historical web browsing behavior, their demographic, their physical location, their proximity to a certain store, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's actually interesting because there's two competing schools of thought here. So the one is if we give someone exactly what they want, that's advertising utopia. Now the other piece is the business piece. So if I'm Home Depot, I may not want to serve up, you know, the fire pit, the outdoor fire pit to a certain user because I don't make a lot of margin on those. What I really want them to see are our branded tools, which we make a ton of margin on, right? And so depending on the advertiser, you know, you can use it for multiple ways. But today we can actually do that. So I can target a user based on a multitude of data that we have, and it's usually cookie-based, and we can truly understand, you know, what this person is interested in. Have they looked for flights in the past, you know, week? Where are they going? Are they going to Vegas? You know, we can get very, very granular in terms of the messaging that we show people, and that's what we've seen. And also something that I think is worth mentioning is that when messaging is localized, so, you know, visit your Walmart at, you know, 35th and Alameda, or you know, get these deals today, you know, in Eden Prairie. By adding that degree of localization to the advertising messaging, it increases the impact sometimes by up to 40%. We measure that on engagement with the ad and things of that nature. So personalization is something that is very well established across the industry. And not only from an advertising standpoint, but also from a web experience standpoint. So if you log on to a retailer's website, you will likely get a different experience than I do based on your profile.
That's fascinating. I asked Jake Batzel a few minutes ago if I could recognize him now, and I'll explain why. Jake is at the Texas Tribune as, I don't know if this is the right title, but you're sort of a research fellow there for a year, having come from Southern Methodist University. Jake's early career was actually at the Seattle Times, and so he's knows our colleague Mike Fancher well. And he decided to go off and get a PhD, and now he's a master's. So he's now the beneficiary of some Knight Foundation money to both explain and sort of evangelize the Texas Tribune business model for local or really statewide community journalism, but also to explore what else is going on. So in a sense, you're sort of combining the experience of Pekka and Reade, and I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about what you heard from the three of these gentlemen and how it maps to the work you're doing this year. Here's a mic. Yep.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I'm Jake Batzel. I'm an assistant professor at Southern Methodist University, but I'm off for a year. Began last week a year-long fellowship at the Texas Tribune based in Austin to study exactly what we're talking about here, the sustainability of journalism. And I invite you guys, we've launched a blog called NewsBiz. It's news-biz.org with my fellow Tim Griggs, who was the former executive director of cross-platform monetization. That's a lot of syllables for the New York Times, but he was basically the architect of the New York Times metered paywall that was so successful. And Tim and I started last week at the Tribune, and the two of us are teaming up on really diving into what can make digital journalism, specifically digital journalism, sustainable going into the future. And Tim is really digging into the Tribune's business model in particular and helping find new ways to make the Tribune even more sustainable than it is. The Texas Tribune is almost 4 years old and has really drawn a lot of attention in the industry for especially its earned revenue with, as a nonprofit news organization, the majority of its revenue comes from not philanthropic donations, although and memberships, although those are still very substantial, but actually events, corporate sponsorships, subscriptions, and other ways that they're actually proactively earning revenue as opposed to smiling and saying thanks for the check. The Tribune's actually biggest signature event is its Texas Tribune Festival, which has over 150 speakers, brings together public policy officials from around the state, and it's at the University of Texas. That's happening later this month, and both Tim and I are really excited to see that up close. It's the third year. It's the biggest and best festival that they've ever had. They've got Ted Cruz as the opening speaker from the new Republican Tea Party senator, and then Wendy Davis, who was famous for her filibuster on the Democrat side, is closing out the session, and there's lots in between. And actually today, Tim Griggs had his debut post on newsbiz.org. There's also a Facebook group, but and he kind of closes with the plea that we've put together kind of a working framework of the things that issues we're going to be digging into, things like revenue and sustainability, the journalism and journalistic innovation, audience development and engagement, which is a special interest of mine. I'm working kind of on concurrently on a book project about the way audience engagement is changing journalism, different products and platforms to make journalism sustainable, and then the nuts and bolts of how you set up the structure, the corporate, if you're a nonprofit, setting up your corporate board, setting up the tax status, that sort of thing. So these are, we've identified 5 central areas that we're going to dive into, and but Tim ends his column with a link to a survey, which is, there's a short link, it's just j.mp/newsbiz survey, where we're really trying to sort of crowdsource in this community and say, well, what's missing from our framework, and what experiences do you have in terms of what's worked that deserve a closer look? Because while Tim is really digging into the Tribune's business model, I'm the best practices fellow, and I'm going to be traveling to newsrooms around the country and perhaps the world that are really finding interesting ways to to make journalism sustainable, and that's the key thing. So, as our panelists have said today, is actually finding a way to pay for journalism to keep it going. And I guess along those lines, I wanted to kind of pose a question to the overall panel, because I heard two, I guess, two things that seem to really make sense, but it also kind of underscores the complexity of this problem, which is, in terms of making a value proposition, making journalism, filling a need for an audience, making it something that's actually valuable to an audience is so much more important these days. And I heard Pekka talk about how part of the hyperlocal value proposition, at least to local advertisers, is contributing to a larger sense of community. And absolutely, it seems like that's important. But then talking to Ron about some of the customized, individual behavior based on, if you took a flight to Las Vegas last week, and it seems like, we have this a little bit of a dilemma of, do we appeal to the greater good, or do we appeal to that one user's, direct, preferences and web history and individual behaviors. And so, in terms of making journalism sustainable, is it filling a need for the individual user, or for the greater community, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty big question, right? I think in a sense, you can still do both, and it has to do with leveraging the technology that we have at our disposal to create experiences with publisher brands that are relevant and customized based on a certain a certain level, right? So you're not going to create the homepage of your local website to be completely dynamic and have everything changed based on a user's either implied preferences or stated preferences. But what you could do is make a portion of that customizable. And I think that's important for two reasons. You're still reporting on the key things that community needs to understand, but you're also creating a relationship with the consumer, and by doing that and by optimizing their experience with that brand, you create a fan, okay? And you start to create an audience. And that is the number one thing in terms of sustainability, in terms of monetization, that local publishers have to do. They have to create an audience. They have to create a loyal following. If they're expecting people to pay for the content, if they're expecting to get advertising revenue, they have to have a scalable audience, and they have to create a value proposition for the advertiser. So that's what I'd say.
I think it's still a people business. I think you need to have people that care on the editorial side. You have to have advertisers, ad reps that really care about their clients. Because what we've seen in our communities, it's about the connection that we can create, with our audience. And for the ad reps, I think more and more, if you asked Steve Davis, our ad director on the Free Press side, more and more he has to be a good friend, he has to be a good counselor, he has to listen to people, tell them how bad things are, and that's what his job is. Once he creates that relationship, it's like Pekka said, that's the connection that they need to say, all right, I'll do that 2x3 again.
Yeah, it's I think one of the most interesting findings on the research and listening to Reade here is that when especially the local advertisers make their decisions on where to advertise, it's not always very rational. that it's more about the feeling and about how you feel about the community. And I think a practical advice about what to do as if you run a newspaper or news organization, the bigger one, is to look into anything that tells about how online communities work. There is lots of research done about communities that just are born within a game. Games are probably the best example, and how those communities work and why some members of those communities become more popular or respected than the others. And Henry Jenkins is one of the scholars at USC Annenberg who has done some work on this. And it's fun to read, because then you actually realize that what probably newspapers are doing wrong. Instead of collaborating to the community, they try to be the masters of the community. They try to control the community. They try to tell people, you have to do this. Please take a picture. Please help us. And in online communities, the value of individual member always comes from what you do for the community. And only after that you can ask people to help. But you have to be the most helpful person in the room to be a valued member in an online community. And that somehow translates probably to real life as well, that it's the whole idea of community, especially in US cases, seems to be very critical, and to understand correctly. I think if you don't like the word ecosystem, I don't, I hate the word engagement when it's used in news sense, because if you read just a couple of studies about online communities, you understand what the engagement actually means instead of the buzzword you use. So it was a big finding for me, because I used to work in a big newspaper, and I developed a bulletin board system as well. And I never figured out why it doesn't work the way we want. Only after I left the company and started doing some reading, I'm like, we did everything wrong. So, speaking from experience.
Mike Fancher has a question. I hope we can all chime in with questions. I just have a quick observation. On the question of personalization, I think it's interesting to think about the fact that daily newspapers at their best essentially personalize the news for a community. And I think we have to realize that the technology now doesn't necessarily require that we have to oscillate between no personalization at all and personalization to one person. We may be wanting to create a world where we create communities of interest, where we customize information to those communities, and where you feel a part of that community, which is not really either total personalization or total non-personalization. Mike?
There's a lot of discussion around the notion of innovation being very difficult for anybody who's an incumbent in any industry, and it's very hard for incumbents to disrupt themselves. And so when we talk about trying to improve the product or the relationship to make the audience more loyal, the journalist hears, how do we make the newspaper better for the people we're now serving? It's very hard to think about who are the people who are not our customers, what needs do they have, how might we reach them? On the advertiser side, this notion of the crack cocaine of the Sunday supplements, somebody is going to disrupt that, somebody's going to solve that problem, and what's the likelihood that if you went to newspaper publishers and said, we want you to disrupt your own business model and we want to help you solve this, disrupt your business and solve this problem, what's the likelihood that they would be great partners in that? So I guess I would ask you all, if the culture gets in the way of either disrupting on the content reader side or disrupting on the advertiser side, what advice would you have to people? How would you work with people who are trying to solve that problem?
So I'll take that. Sure. Publishers, and when I say publishers, I'm talking about local newspaper publishers. If they stop and think about the situation that they're in, and they think rationally about the health and future of their business and their ability to serve their readers, the revenue that they're currently receiving from newspaper inserts is really what's buoying up the whole, it's really what's propping up the whole business, right? And even as that's happening, circulation is declining, readership is declining of the printed form. You know, the other interesting thing is that actual consumption of local news has increased over the past 3 years. And it's because of the multiple you know, devices and channels in which we can consume. But a lot of them are interested in the idea of change, and they know they need to do it. You know, there's a consortium of you know, newspaper holding companies such as Gannett and McClatchy and Hearst that have all kind of came together and supported one solution or one like attempt at a solution, and it's called Find and Save, and it's an experience that lives within the local newspaper's website. It attempts to replicate that Sunday circular experience. But the bottom line, I think, is that that's not going to do it for the consumer or for the advertiser unless the audience numbers increase substantially over the next 3 years. We're still at a place where the fragmentation of media has forced us to cobble together and put together a puzzle that replicates the scale of the Sunday circular. And that's not an easy puzzle to cobble together. And you know, the bottom line is that Sunday circular experience may never be replicated digitally in its current form. But I think that if publishers truly understand, you know, the situation in terms of media consumption, they have no choice but to try and do everything they can to come up with a solution. Otherwise, they're just sticking their heads in the sand and saying, I hope this goes away, but it's not going away. Anybody else? Thoughts? Anyone else? Thoughts?
Yeah, so I have a question. One of the things that was mentioned from the panel today was about how to charge and charging on a weekly basis, which was really interesting to me in the era of big data, more and more data, knowing more and more about the audience, you know, sort of setting aside CPM, CPC, CPA, all of that, and just a very simple, this is how much it costs for the week. So I'm just wondering, Reade, if of those 300 BizBrief clients that you have, if you've heard from any of them that they would like to have a different way to pay or to be, you know, participate in some of that. And Pekka, if you heard from any of the organizations you talk to, if they would like to be able to do something else, but they can't, it's too hard.
I think it is too hard, but you know, I think our clients are buying what we're selling them, and we're not getting any pushback. I mean, the renewal rates are literally 98%, 97%. I mean, I see 1 or 2 drop-offs every month, and hopefully we replace those with 3 new ones. I think it's the you know, it's the money. You know, it's the money. I think what publishers are getting lost is that in the desire to adapt, it has to happen more organically than deliberately. And I think that you know, one of the things that challenged these papers before was Rich was able to convert online revenues to probably over 25% of revenues, but he did it not through innovation, more by gutting what he already had. You know, so you can, I mean, if your print revenues fall 50%, you know, at the you know, and that was the expense of doubling your internet revenues, you're still seeing a net loss of $500,000 to $1 million of revenue. But now you can say, geez, look at us. We've got online revenues of 25 to 30%. And that's not the sustainability that we need going in. And when it comes to the supplements, I'm just going to go back to that for a second, because I was in the direct mail business for a long time. I used to mail to every single household in Maine every single week until I sold my company in 2004. And that still remains another viable way that you can get the print product into every home. And finally, one of the things that I've seen too is that I don't believe that most of, I certainly have never been an innovator, in my career. I've been somebody who believes that you try to follow the trends and try to adapt and give people what they want, and if we can let the organic part work, then I think success follows. I think if we try to push a model, there's only two people in my lifetime that I think have the ability to do that, and that's Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. They've had the ability to say, this is what you need, and I notice everybody in this room, you look around at the laptops, every single one of them is an Apple. But I don't think the rest of us mere mortals can do that.
About the advertising, I think it's really interesting to listen to your experiences, because they match so well on the interviews I've done and earlier interviews. And I think it comes, the people I interviewed told me with almost the exact words that people want to give you money. When you are doing good things for community, or you, even if you run a tech site like Ars Technica, which is a tech site for hardcore geeks and nerds who actually run the servers and repair these computers when we break them. The same message was that they want to give you money, you have to just figure out how to enable it. So both advertisers and readers. And it's against everything I've learned in the big media business. So I think the danger here is that we put all the publishing in the same basket. Local publishers, national publishers, international publishers that don't have to worry about money like New York Times. They are all different entities, and there is no single solution for all of them. Local publishers are doing relatively well if they are in a pocket, as you told me, that there is not really that much competition going on in the local market. But then the national advertisers, national publishers, it's really hard to create a community in a national level and sell them the same bundle every day as a newspaper is a bundle of news. So, yeah, there's no single answer to the advertising question. I think the community-based selling advertising by feel works inside communities, local communities or niche topic communities. But I don't think it would work for New York Times that well. Even though I think that a lot of the paying members of New York Times, or subscribers, whichever term you want to use, are actually paying because they want to support New York Times, not because they get something extra. It's just because they think New York Times is a pretty good thing to be around.
Questions? Yeah. Here you go.
Ron, is this on? Back to the topic of circular. So in the time I spent at Best Buy in innovation, we were trying to move Best Buy off of print into digital, and the feedback always was, our print circular is a profit center here at Best Buy. We charge the vendors so much money that once we pay the media cost to newspapers, we still make a ton of profits. So as you're trying to move retailers to digital, what's happening with that, profit center on the print side in terms of the money?
Sure. No, great question. It translates. So, I really can't elaborate on clients, but one of our larger clients is in the same position, and what they've challenged us with is, how do we create kind of the sell book for digital, so they can sell it to their business partners much the same way that they have historically done on the print side. So it translates. The value today isn't near what the print is, just simply because of the scale. But over time, I feel that pendulum will swing. I mean, it's certainly not going to happen overnight. I think it's going to be several years out before digital surpasses print in terms of delivery of circular content. But that profit that retailers receive can be translated into the digital space.
Hi, Linda Fanton with the Public Insight Network at American Public Media. My journalism career was sort of born out of being an editor of small weeklies in Wyoming, so I can relate to all kinds of what each of you have said about partnership in the community, being a steward of a news source, having the community, feel like you are a valuable asset that's worth standing up for and fighting for. My experience was that people took out ads in the paper not simply because it helped them sell their products, but because it was supporting, a strong community player. And I've also had experiences where that's in journalism where that's not so much the case. So I have sitting next to me, I'm going to pick on Margie, someone who started an online news source with the idea of forming those connections, both of meeting information needs in a new way, but also forming community connections that would make it sort of a must-have asset in the community. And so I'm curious, has that resulted in the kind of revenue sustainability? What have you learned through that experience, Margie? That is sort of in the new world of network journalism and online media and all of those things that might help us better understand where we're going.
Well, I think building that support and understanding in the community has been absolutely essential so far, and but you can't stop. I think the point that we're at right now is recognizing that we've got a very loyal circle of people who understand what we're doing, appreciate what we're doing, are willing to support what we're doing, and we need to reach beyond that. And I think, all of us have found that sustainability lies in multiple revenue streams, so that if one gets disrupted in some way, the whole operation is not disrupted. And I think a key to that is reaching out beyond the initial circle of visibility and support that you have. So that's where we are, and it's a very different mindset than saying we want more eyeballs. It's more and deeper connections with people.
Can you just say a little bit about the revenue sources that the Beacon is? I mean, you actually have thought a lot about this earned revenue idea.
Yeah, well, our primary revenue right now comes from individual donations, some from foundations. We've had some from events, a little bit different type of events than Texas Tribune, but the same. We have not yet built a large base of small donors or a membership base, but that's a logical extension of the thinking that we have. And then there are other potential revenue sources that come up. I think that people have used services, training, that type of thing.
Data point I wanted to ask you, and that is roughly, you may not have been there long enough to have this exact, but roughly what is the breakdown of revenue as between events, sponsorships, and whatever else is there at the Texas Tribune?
Oh boy, I should have brought the the balance sheet, but I do know that I can say that events comprise of roughly 20% of overall revenues, which has been a larger degree of a larger piece of the pie compared to a lot of its other nonprofit peers. It initially started with $1 million from venture capitalist by the name of John Thornton, and then they actually, the Texas Tribune just last week in its history surpassed the $20 million revenue mark in its less than 4-year history. I can say that the corporate sponsorships, which are just, if you go to texastribune.org and see the little tile ads say, you know, the site is sponsored by Texas A&M University or sponsored by, you know, a certain lobbying firm, those actually are a bigger piece of the pie than events by themselves. So when you add the corporate sponsorships on the website with the events, with other supplementary earned revenue streams like subscriptions, and there is some advertising. All of it does collectively add up to just a little bit over 50% of the overall revenue, annual revenue now. So it is now a majority of the revenue.
Yep. We've got time for one more question for sure, if anybody's got one. Great.
Mike Lombardo, I'm president of Newspaper Data Exchange. We're based in St. Louis. Sorry I was late, but had to get out of Chesterfield. So, Ron, we talked on phone. All disclosure, Ron's company is a client of mine, so I'm going to be gentle on the question here. But one of the things that that we look at is, because we work with about 4,000 newspapers every week, and we also have a sister company that processes probably about $2.5 billion in transactions in about 18 months. That's what it runs. One of the comments that was made at the NAA convention was that newspapers are taking preprint dollars, exchanging them for digital dimes, and are exchanging them now for mobile nickels. And so that's all well and good. So when we look at all of those transactions, the average distribution price that a retailer is paying is about $45 per thousand. When we start looking at some of the digital stuff, it's in the $2 to $9 range, depending on positioning, and then mobile could go, I've heard, as 20 cents per thousand, those types of things. That's great if the ROI calculations can come through. On the print side, the retailers have done a very good process of evaluating that return, and they continue to invest because the ROI is there. What can you talk to us about the ROIs for digital and specifically mobile?
Sure. Any time that we kind of embark on a program designed to they're really test programs at this point, designed to understand the impact of digital, the impact of print and digital. How does supplemental digital increase the ROI at the store level? What we always do is break it down into markets by market. So we'll take market A and we'll only run print. We'll take market B and we'll run print and digital, and then market C will run print, digital, mobile. Market D, we won't run anything. And so what that enables us to do is to kind of tease out the incremental impact of each of those media. And I will say that for 2 of our clients in doing that, we have seen a positive ROI from the investment in digital, and it's in line with what was seen in print. Now, my hypothesis as to why that is because print is no longer reaching a large portion of the demographic that these advertisers need to reach, and that's the 18 to 34-year-old demo. So by layering on digital as a component or a companion piece, a supplemental piece to the print program, you're effectively extending your reach against a specific audience almost by 100%. And so that's another thing that we have to take into account is the demographics of the audience and the ability of each medium to reach them. So I would say that initial initial results are positive, and we're going to continue to drive toward that. Now, what's interesting is that there's no single digital circular solution, right? It's all made up of multiple ones, and as we move forward, some will become stronger, some will become weaker, and that's part of the difficulty in this transition, is because, again, there's not a like for like. You take, you're trying to trade one thing for, 20 or 30 different things, just based on the fragmentation of the audience. Yep.
So we've come to sort of the end of this segment, and I want to thank Pekka and Reade and Ron for helping us. I guess the takeaways I'm getting here is advertising still matters, your relationship with your community still matters, and that's where we go from here.